Hi, I'm Andrew, and last time I did a retrospective of several videos on the channel that tell the story of how I like to make music with a random element to it, whether that we're talking about my earlier drumming videos or my later videos of ambient music in canal tunnels made by devices I called the Randomatones. Now, one of my first Randomatones that was featured in this video was a floating one, and I used it just down the road here. There's a big roundabout with 4 subways, and one of them was flooded. And I took this thing down there and made a nice kind of video of this thing playing its music, not very loudly, in this tunnel. And I mentioned in the retrospective that I had a making of that thing, not only the feature, but I made another one after it. It wasn't really a making of, to be fair. It was... I was about to take this floating thing to bits, and I wanted to just sort of document it a little bit, before I got rid of it. So that's what I'm going to show you in a moment. I don't know why I didn't release it at the time. I think mainly it's because I wasn't happy with the sound. I'd used this tie-clip microphone thing plugged in directly to the camera, and the level was too high, and so I'm a bit fuzzy. Sorry about that. Other than that, I think it's okay. It's my slightly younger self talking at great length about something that I managed to talk at great length about somehow. Hope you enjoy it. Hi, I'm Andrew, and just before I take this thing to pieces, I'll give you a quick rundown of what's in it. This is the floating Randomatone that I took down the tunnel a couple of weeks ago. Let's start with this, which is the battery compartment. It's actually just half a milk bottle, and I've taken the battery out so you can see it. This is the battery. It is a 12 volt 5 amp hour lead acid battery made by RS. I chose this one. It's not too heavy. It's about 1.8 kilos. The lower power batteries are more expensive, as were the higher power batteries. So this was the sort of best cost power ratio. Anything bigger than this is probably a bit too heavy for what I want here in terms of being able to get this to float. So that lives in there and powers this cluster of electronics here. On the bottom is a Raspberry Pi 3 Model A+. So it's one of the older, smaller versions. Half a gig of RAM, 4 cores, 1.4 gigahertz, I think, something like that. Easily enough for what I want, which is just generating audio waves. And only consumes about half an amp, at 12 volts anyway, which is really good. The larger models just consume sort of up to 2 amps and do exactly the same thing. So that's no good. On top of that, there is this Hi-Fi Berry stereo amp. I think it's about 30 watts per channel. And there's 2 really nice things about this, which is why I'm using it. One is that the audio is all digital, so I'm not using the digital audio capability of the Raspberry Pi, which is not great. It's a bit of noise. And also, I found in my Python code, just using the automatic volume control did not work well. There were lots of glitches and things like that. They all disappeared when I used this Hi-Fi Berry hat. So digital audio, very nice. Secondly, one really useful feature of this is that it will do the 12 volt to 5 volt step down for me to power the Raspberry Pi without me having to have a separate unit and a separate amp, and where I found I was getting a lot of noise. If I joined the 2 earths together, there was just a whole load of interference. I'd have had to use 2 separate batteries otherwise. And using a battery, I'd have had to have used something like this, which is a 12 volt to 5 volt USB step down. Which I now don't need. So the amp drives these 2 speakers, which are 4-inch, 60 watt. Now even that ratio is a bit of a joke. They may be able to take 60 watts being shoved into them, but the amount of volume that you get out of a 4-inch speaker is not a lot. These are really far too small, not very good. They were not nearly loud enough in the tunnel, and there was just all traffic noise and just general getting lost in the space. They do have an advantage though, which is that the cone here, normally the cones speakers are made of cardboard, these are polyurethane, which meant that they didn't mind getting wet, which was good because it was raining when I did this. So that's the basic Randomatone stuff. I have a couple of things over here to sort of record the experience for me. A thing that looks like a GoPro. This is just an 8-man camera. I say just an 8-man, really good. Probably 40 quid or something. Does the job fine. Wide angle camera, a bit too wide for what I really like normally, but in the tunnel it looked great. It's a nice sort of perspective that you don't get when you look at with normal human vision. It could record audio as well, but the audio on it was terrible. It's too much compression. This was intended to record the audio, this Zoom H1 here. Normally, lovely piece of kit. I take this to gigs and stuff and record them all, and it's good. On the day, however, I broke it because I had been taking this out in the rain and testing it in the afternoon for floating and stuff, and I'd got some rain in one of the mics, so I was down to mono. Never mind, I thought, at least I'll have mono, and I pressed record, and then somehow I managed to press stop record 3 seconds later, so that was all I got. In any case, it didn't matter. The audio on the unit was pretty terrible, mainly because of this down here, which is a pump. Now you may well ask, so the reason goes back to why I wanted floating versions of this anyway. Even with the stationary ones, or the sort of indoor ones, my plan was to make them turn round to act like little mini Leslie speakers. Now that's quite hard to do when you have a unit with a very heavy battery in it. You need some fairly chunky motors, and whereas if it's floating, it just sits in the water and there's very little friction, and you don't need anything like as much power, so that I could just sort of stick a propeller in and make it turn around. I didn't have a propeller, but I had this 12-volt pump here that I'd been using on the garden, the hose pipe. And so it sits here, the water goes in the intake there, in that nozzle, and comes out of that nozzle there, and so makes the thing turn around anti-clockwise. Or it did for about the first 3 minutes, and then the intake got clogged up with leaves and other rubbish, and it stopped. I actually preferred it when it stopped. I thought the forward movement was nicer than having a thing going round and round and making you dizzy the whole time. Talking of floating, you may well ask how I managed to get it to float. Well, that's with the aid of this. This is an inner tube, probably off a lorry tyre or something. This, by the way, is a little light attached to the air nozzle. Normally goes on one's bicycle. And this was not what I thought I ordered on eBay. I was looking for a 16-inch inner tube, and I thought 16-inch would be sort of more or less the external diameter there. It's actually pretty much the internal. It was a bit less. It's about 15.5 inch. So this was pretty massive when I pumped it up, or felt like it. In fact, it was ideal. I got exactly the size I needed and wanted for this. So that was good. And so this thing sat in it, and then just for decoration, seeing as I had this plastic thing in here, the purpose of the plastic was I was expecting this thing to sit a lot lower in the water, and it was to provide some extra buoyancy. The battery doesn't need protecting, it's plastic, but it was just to provide some buoyancy. And so in it, I just put my 2 bike lights there for a little bit of decoration. There we go, that's a nice lampshade. Because this was going out in the evening, it's going to be dark, it just helped to see the thing. I'm now going to take this to bits and use the speakers again in some different units. I've taken everything off. I'm just left with the frame here. This is 2 corners of a cube. There would be 4 of these altogether to make up a cube. But I cut them off diagonally like that, and it makes, when you put it together, it makes this rather nice shape that sort of looks good from any angle, I think. maybe that way. Yeah, I shall make a couple more of these, probably smaller. I think this was a bit bigger than it needed to be, maybe thinner wood, and for the next round of adventures.